Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Agrifood Conversations, brought to you by iSelect Fund, the Van Trump Report, the Yield Lab Institute, and Family Farms Group. My name is Tom Bunn, an associate on the iSelect Fund Ventures team, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our discussion today. Agrifood Conversations is all about driving innovation in agriculture. Each month, we highlight a specific theme, and this month's is dairy alternatives. And on today's call, we are joined by Michelle Egger, the CEO and co-founder of Biomilq. Biomilq's patent-pending technology produces nutritionally equivalent breast milk from cultured human mammary cells. Each of you knows companies are more likely to succeed with the right network of customers, talent, investors, and advisors. We have invited you to this call because you are some of the smartest, most talented people in Biomilq's market who are potential customers for their products and services. You've built a company similar to Biomilq, or you are a sophisticated business person or agricultural professional who understands the market and the challenges and opportunities that Biomilq will face. Before we get started, we have a quick poll question to get a better idea of who we have on the call today. Please take a few seconds to answer. Additionally, a few process comments. We are not soliciting investment in any way whatsoever. You are all also on mute. However, you can use the chat window to ask a question at any time. And at the end of the call, we will open it up for Q&A where you can type a question in and I can read it, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. And finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available for replay. So without further delay, I am pleased to introduce Michelle from Biomilq. Michelle, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. That was a great little intro about all of you folks who have joined us today, and I'm happy to hear many of you have experiences similar to what we are going through. Here at Biomilq, we are creating human breast milk outside of the body to be able to better address the nutritional needs of infants today, address the sustainability or lack thereof in the infant formula market, and be able to think ahead to the future of how we're going to sustainably and ethically feed the populations of generations to come. A little bit about me, my background. I'm a food scientist by training. I spent a majority of my career in dairy fermentation and commercialization, doing everything from trying to make a strawberry yogurt taste like fresh strawberries, all the way to deep exopolysaccharide fermentation technology, large-scale fermentation setup, and commercialization of many different cultured dairy products. I've had an incredible amount of luck in my career and had amazing opportunities to really see the potential for global food systems change through using innovative technology, and departed from the work I'd been doing previously in the private sector to get my MBA at Duke University in social impact and entrepreneurship, where I focus specifically on global food systems change. I've had a variety of really interesting experiences, including being at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the private sector partnerships team for nutrition, while also seeing the access and inequality that we see here in the Deep South based in Durham, North Carolina, as it pertains to food access, even in infant nutrition. My partner and equal in crime is Leila Strickland. She's a PhD cell biologist with a background in fundamental cell biology. And at the end of her postdoc, had her first child and discovered breastfeeding was a really hard experience for her. Like any parent, she saw that there were amazing opportunities to use technology to help solve the problems she was experiencing on a daily basis with her child, and took that opportunity, similar to the timing of Mark Post first eating a hamburger on TV in 2013, to think about how we could create a system to make milk outside of the body. She's been working on that bizarre science hobby, as she calls it, since 2013, and in 2019, we were paired up through a mutual friend, and it was immediately a connection of matching complementary skill sets and interests and a passion for infant nutrition. So what are we actually doing? We are creating a product with the nutrition of breast milk and the practicality of formula. We specifically use the language practicality because we don't think any parent is selecting infant formula because it's the convenient or the easy way out by any means. They're just facing the daily realities of life and medical realities for a lot of women in the US and world that breastfeeding can be really challenging. It's a beautiful process for some, and we celebrate those mothers who are able to successfully breastfeed their children exclusively. But for a lot of parents, it's unachievable, as we'll talk about. And so for us, we see that there's an opportunity for cultured human breast milk to be able to come to the market using our patent pending process. And it really couldn't come soon enough. I mean, you see 20% increased global infant mortality when you feed formula, mainly attributed to water contamination. We see about $238 billion in attributed cognitive loss globally, mainly based on the fact that we're not hitting developmental milestones, not having the appropriate precursors for cognitive development and growth in children. And because of that, you see parents incorporating a huge amount of shame, stigma, guilt, and cognitive load in their daily lives by making the trade-offs of having to choose an inferior nutritional product for their children. When you take a look at studies done in the past, 2/3 of moms feel guilty for not breastfeeding and feel stigmatized for feeding formula. And when you talk to moms who are breastfeeding actively today, they're also judged for the decisions they're made, whether they use bottles or chest feeding. It's an incredibly shameful and ignorant part of the sector on the behalf of many people who aren't parents, trying to judge others. On top of that, and attributing to that, we see about 16% of babies in the US are being breastfed exclusively after 6 months, which means 84% of babies have already been moved on to partially or exclusively infant formula. And while there's not actually anything entirely wrong with that decision, fed is best in our opinion, there are better ways that we can think about moving forward into the future that have lower carbon emission and attributed freshwater gallons used for production, that have higher nutritional value, and that can increase the access for mothers to be able to appropriately feed their children if they cannot breastfeed exclusively. And it's a pretty big market to be able to be there. Not only are we passionate about it for the impact and the ability to really change how we feed future generations, it's currently about a $71 billion global market when we attribute to infant formula, 9.5% CAGR year over year. Coming from the CPG world, I can tell you 9.5% CAGR gets most people pretty excited. And it means that there are a lot of market drivers that are continuing to grow that space. Women are having children later, have more access to family planning. They tend to have more wealth at the point where they're having children, and they're being more thoughtful about the products that they're buying, following the standard driver of any parent, which is what's you wanting to do best for your child. And formula, well, it's an option right now that exists in addition to breastfeeding, lacks the hundreds of sugars that naturally occur in breast milk, called human milk oligosaccharides, which we know are critical to immune support, cognitive development, and muscular development. Human breast milk is an incredibly complex liquid with about 2,500 plus molecular components that are all in perfect constellation, meaning they have the right conformation and isomeric form to be bioavailable and digestible. Millions of years of evolution have got us there. And while infant formula is an okay in-between option, we see that getting as close to nutritional equivalence with human breast milk should really be the goal that we move forward for infant nutrition and the gold standard moving on. So I'm sure, as most of you are here for today, you would like to know how the heck are we actually doing this? We have to be reminded pretty frequently that for us it's basic science, but for others it sounds like pigs flying. So we're able to actually collect human mammary epithelial cells from a direct mother and create a custom milk product for her. I'll talk a little bit more about our go-to-market strategy later and why we've selected this as our first route. But needless to say, we have the opportunity to make a custom breast milk product using the exact cells from the human mom today. We're able to populate those cells to a large enough quantity to inoculate into our bioreactor and grow them up to a state where they naturally compartmentalize, just as they would in the body. Human mammary epithelial cells are able to pull in nutrients from one side, turn on their biosynthetic pathways, and secrete all 2,500 components plus out the other side, never intermixing the two. In the body, that would be blood and milk. For us, that's media and milk. Because we're able to maintain that barrier properties, we have no downstream purification, separation, concentration required in our product, and are able to make a full product directly from the cell lines as they would be produced in the body, just outside of the body. From the moment we receive a cell sample, it will take us about 6 weeks to be able to grow up enough milk to be able to package and ship that milk directly to a parent. We're able to grow the milk under sterility, package it under sterility, and ship it to be shelf stable, enabling parents to have the same consumer behaviors as using a powdered milk, but not have to go through the dilution process or worry about any kind of contamination steps because of that. We have the opportunity to actually produce more milk than the average woman would need in this customized model, and therefore have an opt-in function where you can donate excess milk to be used for children in need throughout the world. I'm sure we'll have questions more about the tech, and we can swing back around to that at any time when we finish through the main pitch. So as I alluded to, we've really thoughtfully looked to how we're going to go to market. We believe that this tech, no matter how cool it is, really doesn't matter if we can't appropriately socialize this product. And so for us, that means starting in a personal use case. We're looking at a subscription model for an early adopter mother set or father set, as the gender of the cells don't matter, to be able to make a custom milk product shipped directly to them. That gives us a year or two to be able to scale up bioreactor sizing at the same time, to be able to go to a more mass retail product, which would require higher yields and higher capacity, and enables us to create a really evangelized set of parents who believe in our product, trust in Biomilq, and know that we're doing best by their children. Because of that, they do a lot of the marketing and discussion for us, which we know a majority of purchases made by parents are influenced by their friends and family as to how they're going to decide to feed their children. Long term, we see the aspirations of moving into a retail product, more omni-channel format, able to bring it to the commonly purchased locations where we see large quantities of infant formula being bought today. That likely entails using immortalized cell lines and allows for more optimization to increase yields at that time when we come to market. There's also interesting opportunities to consider that aren't necessarily a part of our pipeline today, but they include animal technology licensing. So obviously there's large markets in commoditized dairy. And we also see that there's biomedical and clinical use cases, both for NICU babies that have extreme needs in terms of nutrition, but challenges in terms of delivery, and looking at aging populations that may have similar gut and microbiomes to infants. With the proper resources, we believe we can come to market in a full retail fashion by 2025. At this point, we've raised a $3.5 million seed round. We're using that cash today mainly to hire new employees, to work on the 3 design of experiment core lines you see below me on the screen here, and to continue to layer IP on top of the 2 provisional patents we already have in place. We are looking to raise our Series A in the next 18 months, which will likely be a relatively substantial raise, but has not been yet announced what sizing that will be. That Series A raise enables us to move into regulatory safety and efficacy testing, which is a relatively costly process in terms of feeding to the most precious beings on Earth. To get to that point, the intent is that timeline will give us the ability to prove that this product is superior to infant formula as it stands today nutritionally, and begin down the path of testing scientifically and showing through clinical trials that it's nutritionally equivalent to breast milk. That involves 3 design of experiment scale-up procedures that give us line of sight to being able to say, yes, this product is scalable and it's worth building out the capacity to do so. We have a number of work streams around process optimization, both around purpose-built bioreactors and some of the feeding and extracting mechanisms associated with that. We also have proprietary cell line development already in process versus using ATCC commercialized cell lines that exist today, and also have food grade media project work to be doing. We're about 10x unit economics away from reaching the top end of infant formula today, but still have a ways to go reducing the cost of media to make this a cost competitive and accessible product to as many parents as possible. As I said, after that point, really a large part of our focus is that initial commercialization and safety and efficacy. So really being able to go through the testing regulatory wise to come to market. The hope is that we have the ability in about 2 years to have launched a product, but we've given ourselves up to 5 considering the regulatory pathway is going to be challenging and still is unknown the exact timeline and length to get there. The hope is that we can pull it down to be about 3, but as trained scientists, we know that it's better to under-promise and over-deliver. We are working on a number of IP strategy details, as mentioned. We have a regulatory consultation, which is clearly a very important part of our process, and are working on business development and product strategy, especially around commercialization as it goes to socialization of product, fertile ground sowing, and thinking through the exact branding and brand architecture of the final product to be sold in market. We hope you've latched on with a little taste of what we're doing, and we'll stay in touch. And I'm sure you have many, many questions. So I look forward to starting to answer some of those and hopefully get to know some of you better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for the great presentation. For the audience's knowledge, you can ask a question by using the Q&A box found in the middle of your screen, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you to ask your question out loud. But Michelle, while the audience is thinking, I guess to get us started, $1,300 a month seems very high to me. But granted, I don't have very much experience with this. Can you talk a little bit about pricing? And I assume it's going to be a ultra premium product. But how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. So what's surprising is how much parents already spend on infant nutrition today. I think one of the interesting discussion points that's starting to come more to the forefront is the true cost of breastfeeding as well, which has a pretty increased caloric need and of course, drawbacks and trade-offs for women as they're trying to breastfeed and hold down full-time jobs. That aside, if you compare directly to infant formula, on average, there are we're looking at between 60 and 90 cents for a premium formula on the market today, something you find on your average Target shelf. And that's per ounce, which ends up being pretty costly if you're considering that you're feeding exclusively infant formula. When you look at a much more expensive option, so the truly super premium options out there, which are HIP or Hala, for instance, from Europe, which actually cannot be imported legally, but there are plenty of parents working around that, you're looking at about $1.78 an ounce on average that a parent is spending on that product, which is almost exactly what we've benchmarked in terms of being able to do cost to cost, a subscription model with us for 6 months versus paying for HIP or Hala, which is a GMO organic type of infant formula based out of Europe. We see that there is appetite to pay in this space, but do definitely acknowledge that there's quite a bit of room to bring down the cost in terms of accessibility. So we, as I mentioned, are about only 10x away from where we need to be unit economics basis to be competitive with infant formula, the point of a more broad launch, and have the ability to bring down that cost to not only expand here in the US, but eventually have more global ties in low and middle income growing countries with a large amount of appetite for infant formula today.
Great, thank you. From a nutritional perspective, does it matter who gives the samples initially, or is the final product fairly uniform regardless?
It's a great question. So there's some research that there are some unique differences parent to parent as it pertains to child, but there's also quite a bit of variability we see across a feed for the same child and parent pairing. So one of the challenges we have is really establishing what's a gold standard, what's the basis of which we're going to actually even be able to compare these products. In the US, it's currently illegal to sell breast milk. It is in most of the world. So we see a pretty aggressive black market between $3 and $4 an ounce, typically, of human breast milk being sold. And there's no standard of identity because of that that's enforced by the government by any means. And there really hasn't been a lot of investment in human milk composition work to understand what are the ranges of macro and micronutrients that we're talking about. So a large part of the work we're doing, in addition to just defining for ourselves internally what the expected table stakes have to be in terms of an infant nutrition product, we're thinking more broadly about what are the structure function pairs that are going to be incredibly important to tie to outcomes, both to talk to parents and clinicians about. And that's where we're spending more of our research time and dollars, really digging in and thinking critically about how we can be truly advantaged to describe some of the benefits of breast milk for those who otherwise wouldn't be able to reach for that product. I think one of the things that's important to note is that infant formula today really doesn't meet a lot of the nutritional needs of a child other than the basis of sustaining life. And so we see that even if we don't get entirely to nutritional equivalency as a first pass of launch, we know that we are able to be 10x, if not more, better than what's on the market today, and can work to optimize from there around what are truly the benefits of a more distinct pairing mother to child or across populations globally.
Great, thank you. We have a couple questions in from the audience. From an anonymous attendee, they ask, you mentioned gender of the parent was irrelevant as it didn't matter the gender of the cells. Can you expand on what that might mean for single fathers or double father households?
Yeah, it's one of the things we're really, really excited about, actually. Human mammary epithelial cells exist both in a female body or a male body. They're a part of the mammary gland just below the surface of the skin. In women, that would be in the breast tissue. In males, that's in pectoral muscle tissue. And it's really just the difference in stimulation of hormones that causes lactation, along with the appropriate precursors that are there. So we can use, regardless of gender, male or female, mammary cells and are able to stimulate for lactation. We see that not only does this provide for LGBTQ couples or single fathers, but also may have some really interesting implications in terms of equity of feeding between parents. Right now, one of the burdens that mothers experience is being the sole parent that can truly feed a child if you're trying to exclusively breastfeed. And it means for a lot of pumping and storage and just general kind of hassle in trying to manage that between parents, versus if we have the ability to actually make a milk from a father, it enables him to be more involved in the child's life and remove some of those barriers to really truly sharing the feeding needs of a child. So we think there's a lot of potential, of course, to serve mothers, but have a lot of excitement about being able to serve fathers just as actively in this market.
Nice, nice. Steve Welker asks, is it possible to start with dairy milk, goat milk, or others to develop human infant formula with the same nutritional profile?
It's an interesting question. So I think if you think about the basis with which we've tried to use other animal milks today, you of course can sustain the life of a child on cow's milk. But we know that it's not the most bioavailable or digestible forms of the nutrients because it's not what's actually been optimized for human consumption. So there is the possibility that you could use the cells from another animal to produce a milk, and you might be able to even genetically engineer them to be able to produce the components that would look more similar to human milk. But there really isn't a benefit in our eyes with utilizing those particular milk sources to support life if we can essentially biomimicry or create human breast milk outside of the body. Now, I think an interesting kind of tangent to this question is more around the accessibility question, which is that human cells to make milk is still going to be expensive, even as we can bring down the accessibility and the price point to get there. It's not an overnight switch. So there might be interesting opportunities to actually do blending of current existing mammalian milk sources with some of the additional ingredients that come from human milk to really boost the nutrition without necessarily putting a price tag that is as expensive and therefore not as accessible to as many parents as we would like to reach. Hopefully that answered the question.
Great, thank you. Michelle, I'm curious how you think about consumer perception with, as you know, astronomical rises in organic and natural. This seems, on the surface that it could be viewed by many consumers as unnatural or risky for such for such precious cargo, if you will. How are you dealing with that? And despite what the science may say about safety, how are you navigating, I think, the uphill, or what could be an uphill consumer route?
Yeah. Well, it definitely starts with thinking before you're even trying to talk about a product, to talk about a landscape. So we think a lot about what we're doing now is really market creation work and helping support other voices, other research, other work being done in this space to give more information, education, accessibility to parents. So rather than starting with, here's a new product, you should consider buying it, spending more time to just give the information to parents they need to make a better informed decision. The core driver of any parent is, I want to have the best option for my child possible. And so we don't have to do any explaining as long as we can show the nutritional profile is superior to what's on the market today and gets pretty darn close to what comes out of the body. But it's really more about that initial socialization, making sure that the market's adequately prepared to receive a product like this, feels that we are trustworthy, credible, believable, and feels that they've had their questions answered. And I think one of the ways we do that is being very cognizant of the language that we're using, of doing very deep stakeholder engagement, and really thinking through even those folks who we aren't designing the product for, how they may perceive or question how the product's made or what it does. One of the things that I think have in our favor is we're an all-female company at this point, which means we all litmus test this against continuously, would I feed this to my children or future children? And that makes it a much more personal problem we're trying to solve, and definitely more actively considered about what are the table stakes as an educated and informed scientist that I would require to make sure that this is something I would feed to my child. So we're not only working through the regulatory channels to meet the requirements of launching a product in the United States via the FDA, but also thinking through as a parent, what are the things that I would be worried about? What are the questions I would have? How would I want to know more about this product? And who would I be asking those questions of? And making sure not only are we trying to have that information out there, both on our product and on breast milk versus infant formula more broadly, but also arming and supporting those people who are going to be, who mothers and parents are turning to have some of the information to get that conversation started, so that it's not just us trying to convince someone, but really trying to present the information and allow parents to make the best decision to feed their children.
Got it, thanks. Can you touch on the donation aspect you mentioned before a little bit more?
Yeah. So at this point in our initial foray into the market with a custom model, we know that we can produce more milk than the average family is going to require. And rather than shutting that milk production down immediately, as long as there's an opt-in capability, we see that there's interesting opportunities to partner with aid organizations or other organizations serving those in need to be able to feed infants more holistically today. So there's obviously a relatively robust set of infants that end up in a NICU setting that unfortunately need concentrates and other fortified milks to be able to survive, because breastfeeding isn't possible in that current stage. We know that there are disaster and war-torn parts of the world where breastfeeding is incredibly challenging for mothers and women, or where children may not have access to a woman who's lactating. And so we see that there could be some really interesting opportunities to partner with other coalition organizations to be able to spread our product out more broadly, and serve those parents who really have a genetic or have a definite need to be able to have this product in hand. We're not touting ourselves as a one-for-one company, where we don't see this as us trying to serve well. It's more thinking that there are so many parents out there who really need access to this product. And while that's top of mind for us, and we're working to bring down the cost as quickly as possible to serve those parents, and also considering other payer routes to be able to cover this product, we are realistic in that there are some that we may not reach right away who differentially could change the lives of their children if they had access to this product. So trying to think critically about how we can do our part as a part of this technology, really helping the world.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the attendees?
It looks like there's one from Jeanette. Is that correct?
Oh, you're right. I missed that. Sorry, Jeanette. Does Biomilq have any plans to incorporate IgA into cultured breast milk? Will immune cells from the mother-father also be cultured in addition to epithelial cells?
I can tell somebody has a background in cell biology on here. It's fun to get good questions like that. At this point, we do not have the intent of adding antibodies to the product or co-culturing to create antibodies. Well, we know there's literature support that that's possible, and have some of our own inklings internally here. We understand that the moment you add a IgA or secretory IgA component, you then push more into a therapeutic class. And that pairing between mother and child is slightly more important than just nutritional equivalency. So while we see long-term that there might be some really interesting applications and are definitely keeping it top of mind, our first foray into the market will focus exclusively on nutritional equivalency and not push into immunologically equivalent. I think one of the interesting things to point out is, while we talk a lot about, especially in the era of COVID right now, about secretory IgA or other immunoglobulin content, we see that there is a huge amount of kind of pre-nutritional work that has to be done to even support the healthy microbiome growth in a child, and see that if even we can increase that, that feels like low-hanging fruit in comparison to going all the way to a fully immunologically relevant product. So it's for us a bit of a how do you get to market quickly and assist the most children as quickly as possible, and then consider what are the iterations or innovations that come next to be able to truly support the full health of a child. We've made the tactical decision at this point too, for those who might be breastfeeding advocates on the call, to think about how do we not encourage parents at this point to currently replace breastfeeding with this product. There is a huge number of skin-to-skin immune benefits that we know come through the act of breastfeeding. We also know that there's a lot of benefits for mom as well, both for her health and well-being in the short term and long term. And so I have no interest in replacing breastfeeding if a parent can do it even partially, and therefore kind of like the fact that our product is just nutritionally equivalent and therefore slightly inferior to chest feeding, to enable the most parents possible to continue to keep up that habit for the immunological benefit, rather than replacing entirely with this product from the beginning of birth.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for the question, Jeanette. Well, if there aren't any more questions, Michelle, how can the audience help you out, and how can they find you? How can they reach you?
Yeah, so we are actively doing a large amount of stakeholder engagement. As I mentioned, we are speaking to lots of moms, lactation consultants, clinicians, IBCLCs, researchers, and are really just looking for a community of both advocates and those who have questions or concerns. Some of our best conversations come from talking to people that don't quite understand or are concerned about the technology, and can really help not only assuage some of those fears, but learn about how we can talk about this product or how we can bring this product to market in a way that might be more beneficial to more people. So if you yourself are in this field and are interested in chatting with us, we would love to talk to you. If you have friends, family, associates that you think would be of interest or could assist us in any way, we are always open to referrals and introductions. And we're really cognizant of the fact that there are many people out there with strong opinions in this space, and are just excited that there's so much passion either for or not for innovation in the space, because I think it really says to how much of a problem we are trying to solve and assist parents in today. You can reach me at michelle.egger@biomilq.com. You can also send a note through our website if it interests you, or find me on LinkedIn. Always open to a conversation, and just delighted to find as many people passionate about improving infant nutrition out in the world as we are here at Biomilq.
Nice. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on all of your progress to date. I'd also like to thank the audience for their active participation, and to let them know that, as a reminder, we host these calls every week at 3 p.m. Central, and you can register for them by going to agrifoodconversations.com. So if you know someone that would like to watch this webinar, feel free to share it with them. A replay of this webinar will be emailed to you in the next 24 hours, or they can view it on agrifoodconversations.com. So again, Michelle, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.